should we be sending doses of the Pfizer vaccine to New South Wales as they deal with their outbreak? 141 cases yesterday. We're expected to get today's number in about 20 minutes. And the startling feature is that these case numbers continue to rise despite lockdown restrictions being toughened. Now, there are figures this morning that Western Australia has the lowest rate of vaccination in the country. Should we be sending our jabs to New South Wales? Dave says, if we are in fact all in this together, then we need to send it over to New South Wales because they need it the most at the moment. That's according to Dave. Jones says, yes, we should help. COVID has made us mean and selfish. On the line, one of the country's leading infectious diseases expert, Professor of Infectious Diseases at the ANU Medical School, Peter Collignon, good morning.
Good morning.
It's an interesting debate, isn't it? And like everything, it's gotten political and fast, but it was Friday after National Cabinet that Gladys Berejiklian said she wanted other states to send their doses. It doesn't seem like any are too keen. What should we do ethically and medically?
Well, I think this is a dilemma. I think the one thing about Western Australia is that most people there live in Perth and there seems to be less people vaccinated than we'd like. And, I hope that's not an element of complacency because, whenever it breaks out in Melbourne or Sydney, it really goes up quickly. Anybody over the age of 50 should go and get an AstraZeneca vaccine because it's available and relative in that age group. The benefits so far outweigh the risks because it's almost inevitable will get spread throughout Australia of COVID eventually. We don't want it till the end of this year at the earliest if we can avoid it because that's by the time we'll get most people vaccinated or the vast majority vaccinated. But get vaccinated. The sooner you're vaccinated, the better. But from sending doses to other states, it's still very important that all states get a reasonable vaccination rate along age groups, and including Western Australia. So I think we've got to be a bit careful about not sending too many vaccines to New South Wales. I do think they need to get more, and particularly the ones for a younger age group, because that's still the group that is transmitting it and sending it more back into their families, and even one dose of the vaccine makes a difference. But equally, if you vaccinate somebody today, it takes 2 weeks before you see an effect. And if you space them 3 or 4 weeks apart, 6 weeks to get the full protection. And you can have a problem in Perth in 3 or 4 weeks' time. This is a bit unpredictable when you're going to get an outbreak and spread. So we still need to keep the same sort of numbers going up in all the states, even though the ones that don't have outbreak. But yes, I think like they did in Melbourne, a couple of months ago, and now in Sydney, I think there is an argument for sending a bit more of what the Commonwealth is bringing in to those areas that have got an outbreak at the time, and for in Sydney, sending it to the area that's got more of an outbreak, because that does mean with time, particularly if this goes on for any period of time, you'll get less spread and you'll get less deaths, including in younger people.
The pattern this year seems to be that when outbreaks happen, that vaccination queues spike. We saw it in Melbourne. We're now seeing it in Sydney. What would your message be to West Australians who are perhaps playing the wait-and-see game?
Well, I think, this is where, even what's happened in Sydney, none of us would have predicted. So this is unpredictable. I think it is very likely that all of us will end up getting exposed to the COVID virus. So, we're not going to have zero COVID forever in Australia. We've been very good at buying time, and we need to buy some more time. But come early next year, it will be a different situation once all adults have had their chance to get vaccinated. At the moment, there is a very effective vaccine for those over the age of 50, and that's the AstraZeneca one, and it's in ample supply. And one of the problems with people who say, 65, saying, oh, look, I'll wait till the Pfizer because it's got less of a risk. For every one vaccine we give to a 70-year-old, for instance, of the Pfizer, is one 35 or 40-year-old that's not getting it because there's not infinite, there's still limited supply. So I do think anybody over the age of 50 needs to go out and get the AstraZeneca vaccine. The risk, there's about a 1 in a million chance that you might die as a result of getting that vaccine. But even in the perspective of, a 70-year-old, for instance, is still not vaccinated, about 25% aren't. If you get COVID, your chance is 1 in 50 of dying of COVID. Now, even if it doesn't spread widely, even if there's a 10% chance that, population eventually get it, that's still, quite a reasonable chance you can die, and much, much higher chance you'll die from the disease than the AstraZeneca vaccine. And to put in perspective the risk, you've probably got more chance of, dying in a car accident driving around the day than your risk of actually dying from the AstraZeneca vaccine. And equally, people who take aspirin to prevent heart disease at the age of 50, I didn't realise it was that high, but about 1 in 100,000 people die as a side effect from that, mainly from gastrointestinal bleeding.
Right.
So we've got our risk out of proportion to the benefit. So, look, we've got a very effective vaccine. It's mainly designed for people now because who are older, because of this very rare side effect, but there's still maybe 20, 30% of people over the age of 50 or 60 who haven't even received that vaccine. And yes, we need more Pfizer, but we need everybody vaccinated by age group. And, please, if you've got a chance to get on the queue, get on the queue. And yes, send a bit more to New South Wales, but we still need to make sure everybody in Western Australia is vaccinated as well.
Professor Peter Collignon, just very, very briefly, the fact that a 38-year-old woman has now died from this outbreak in New South Wales from the Delta variant, it's been reported she had no other underlying medical conditions. What do we conclude from that?
Well, it just shows everybody will need to be protected. Now, your chance, I can't tell you what 38, but if you're a 40-year-old, your chance of dying of COVID if you get it is about 1 in 1,000. So if you get a lot of people infected, even who are, late 30s, 40-year-olds, you'll have 1 in 1,000 of those people who will die from it, a lot more in intensive care and in hospital. So, look, this can affect any age group. It much more affects 80-year-olds than 40-year-olds. But 40-year-olds are not immune to this. They still can get infected and again, the message if people haven't got it is get vaccinated.
Professor Collignon, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Peter Collignon from the ANU Medical School. 14 minutes to 9 on the texts. Dave says, don't rob Peter to pay Paul. We need to vaccinate our own first. I know where you're coming from, Dave, but we're all Australians, aren't we? Vincent says, Gareth, if we're sending firefighters to Canada to help them out, then obviously we should be sending our doses to New South Wales to help them out in their current situation. Vincent, thank you very much.